そしてお前に称賛などもとより皆無だったと理解しろ。
Okay, boys, set the terror level at code brown, because I need to change my pants.
What's going on, everyone? And I am back again today to finally deliver on the double feature Overlord cut content breakdown that I've promised for so long. So yes, guys, today we are going to be wrapping up the Season 1 episode breakdowns by covering episodes 12 and 13, the final episodes of the Bloody Valkyrie arc of the story. So I have to say, seeing it again in anime format and then reading the book itself, it's shocking to me like how inconsistent the pacing is of this volume. Episode 10 covered over 100 pages. Episodes 12 and 13, they don't even cover 100 pages together. It's insane like how much more content is shoved into some episodes of Overlord versus other episodes and certain events that they take their time with in the anime. So that's why I felt compelled to make this breakdown a double feature just in terms of content covered in the light novel. Also because just like how the episodes flow, they flow like pretty much right into one another, so breaking that up would be a little weird. So with that being said, guys, let's go ahead and get into what I consider the meat and potatoes of Overlord Season 1. So first off, we have this scene with Ainz approaching Shalltear, like basically in all his mental thoughts like going forward there. Really, these scenes are pretty much one-to-one. You're going to be hearing me say that a lot, because as I said earlier, the anime took way more time with this, so they were able to more faithfully adapt this section of the light novel than a lot of the previous episodes did. However, there is something I want to comment on in this whole scene, and that's just the general outlook of the fight and how people are viewing this, because I don't think the anime did a perfect job at explaining just how massive a disadvantage Ainz is going into this battle with Shalltear. The main problems with this matchup is that Ainz, number one, does not have a PvP optimized build. I've said this several times, but Ainz's build was focused on roleplay. He did not optimize himself for fighting, and Shalltear was literally created just to fight. She has a PvP optimized build, not to mention Ainz's specialty is in necromancy, which means summoning. Shalltear's gear and skills and abilities all hard counter that. Peroncino did this as kind of a joke because Ainz was like one of his really good friends, so he kind of created Shalltear as like an anti-Ainz thing as a joke, but that is actually biting him in the ass this time around. Ainz also has a specialty in instant death magic, but of course that is completely worthless on Shalltear, who has resistance or immunity to instant death stuff. So basically Ainz's strengths are worthless against Shalltear, whereas Shalltear's strengths are very, very effective against Ainz. Not to mention just in terms of general builds, he's at a disadvantage as well. So that's why everyone is so pessimistic about this fight going into it. I just wanted to talk about that a little bit more. And there's also another thing I wanted to comment on that I feel like a lot of people have asked me about, and that is, what is Ainz wearing? So it's never really specifically stated what that robe is Ainz is wearing. However, based on context clues, what I believe the whole thing was is that his normal gear basically amplifies his natural strengths, his ghost magic, his summons, all that stuff. And since he's not going to be doing any of that stuff against Shalltear, he basically swapped out his gear for his strategy of like anti-holy magic kind of stuff. That's why I think he's wearing the different gear. It's never explicitly stated, but that's the only reasoning I could think of as to why he's wearing it. Quickly, guys, I want to say, if you like these Overlord content breakdowns, please consider liking the video to let me know. Also, YouTube helps me out if I say this earlier in the video, but please consider subscribing to the channel if you aren't already. We're getting closer and closer to 40,000, and that's a milestone I would really, really love to hit. It's going to be huge. So if you could help me out and subscribe, I would greatly appreciate it. It would also let you know whenever I post in the future, so you can get a notification whenever I get these out.
Shut up! Shut the f*** up!
Alright, with that being said, let's continue on with the breakdown. So we have Ainz approaching Shalltear, and one small difference I did want to point out is that in the light novel and in the movie adaptation of this part, Shalltear is already in her armor. Also in the movie, we get to see Shalltear's encounter with Platinum Dragonlord, which we see briefly in the beginning parts of Season 2. The light novel doesn't mention her encounter with Platinum Dragonlord either, but I thought it was interesting that the movie did. So then Ainz begins his buffs, and one of the interesting things we get in the light novel is Ainz' mental state. Something that's explained in the light novel is he keeps having these kind of back and forths in his mind about like Suzuki Satoru versus Ainz Ulgon. Basically, Suzuki Satoru is like, oh man, this is a life or death fight. I'm scared. Like, I don't know how this is going to turn out. But Ainz Ulgon is like, no, we got to do this. No, this is going to be a battle. I'm going to face this. It's this weird war that's he describes in his mind of what he is and like who he is. Is he Suzuki Satoru? Is he Ainz Ulgon? And I think that's something interesting that isn't really explained all that much in the anime that we get in the light novel. Another thing that's cut out of the anime is Ainz removes a ring on his finger that is a resurrection item. Basically allows Ainz to auto-resurrect with very little penalty if he's killed, and he removes that before this fight. He does that sort of as a symbolic gesture of his commitment to the fight. Like, he does it in his mind in order to like prepare himself for a life and death conflict. But that was just a small thing, just showing, you know, Ainz is prepared to die. So then Ainz proceeds to cast Fallen Down, and this is where we get our explanation on super tier magic. So I've explained super tier magic a few times, but the basic gist is that it's a super powerful spell, but it has a lot of drawbacks that were instituted in Yggdrasil for game balance. A few of the drawbacks are they have a very long casting time. There's a freeze on casting super tier magic spells for a time limit after one is used. The caster can't move while they're casting the spell, and also their defenses are lowered. So they're basically sitting ducks while they're casting the super tier magic. It has a lot of drawbacks. It's a very particular type of use of spell. So then Ainz casts the spell, and we have the initial confrontation here, the first battle part. A lot of the battle in the anime is exactly the same as it is in the light novel, but in the light novel we get a little bit more information on what is exactly happening, and we also get information on some of the spells that are being thrown around in this first confrontation here. For example, Hold of Rib, when Ainz uses that spell on Shalltear, Shalltear is able to completely nullify it because she has an immunity to travel obstructions, just explaining a little bit more of the mechanics of the fight and what is happening. Another thing that's explained in this fight is that Ainz realizes like this is a life or death thing, and he's grateful in that moment that he's an undead. It's one of the many times throughout the story of Overlord that Ainz is grateful he's undead and having his emotions suppressed. It allows him to stay cool despite how nervous he is in this fight. Another thing I think people would like to know is that when Shalltear uses Mana Essence on Ainz to get an idea on how much MP he has, she summarizes that he has more than 1.5 times her MP. So he has tons and tons of MP. So the fight continues to play out. There's a couple of small omitted scenes from the fight. One is that Shalltear casts this barrier in order to wear out Ainz. It's like an attempt to wear out Ainz, but he easily breaks it. Most of the part of this fight is from Shalltear's point of view, so it's basically just her explaining like, oh, I'm using this, and oh, Ainz is countering with this for this reason. Like when she turns into her mist form, Ainz uses a spell called Astral Smite, which literally is made to do damage to incorporeal forms. So she takes damage from that attack, and that's why she's like bleeding after she like reforms out of the mist, because that spell was literally for that reason. We also get a little bit more information on Shalltear's skills. So one of the questions I remember seeing once is that why didn't Shalltear use her like kind of reverse time healing skill when she got her arm exploded in episode 13? And that's because we get her limits on her skills in the light novel. So when Ainz uses Reality Slash on Shalltear and she basically like heals it by reversing time, that's another one of her skills. She can only use that skill 3 times a day. She can also only use Purifying Lance 3 times a day and Negative Impact Shield 2 times a day. So she has hard limits, and she's using these skills very, very heavily. But we get a lot of Shalltear's kind of mental state in this fight. That's we did get a little bit in the anime, but we get way more in the light novel, and just like how she's planning this out. And she's not really planning this out. She's basically just kind of using her best stuff against Ainz. She's just like, oh, I have all these powers, I have all these skills, I'm at such an advantage, I can just use my best powers on Ainz. And she even like has a moment where she's like, oh, I should monitor his health and see like what's doing damage. She just decides she doesn't want to do it because it's too much work. So she's not approaching this fight in the optimal way, and that's like one of her biggest downfalls. And I think that's shown way more in the light novel as to like exactly how much Shalltear is overlooking in the fight compared to Ainz. Another quick scene that's omitted from the anime is basically where they both decide to stop for a second and heal. So Shalltear is able to use a spell called Greater Lethal, which releases basically a burst of negative energy, and for undead like her, that actually has a healing effect on her. Ainz uses the same spell, and Shalltear's just like, what? Like how are you able to use that spell? You're an arcane, you shouldn't have any healing spells. And Ainz was able to do this by equipping an item that lets him use the spell. It's a little bit weaker than normal, but it basically lets him use a healing spell, which he would otherwise not be able to use. So then we have their battle of magic and everything, and there's a scene that's sort of altered in the anime. Basically, Ainz casts Obsidian Sword, which we see, I think, for the first time in season 4, and then he also casts Greater Magic Seal on her, and she uses the last of her MP on the spell Magic Destruction. So after Magic Destruction is cast in the anime, that was the end of Shalltear's MP. So then Shalltear summons her greatest ace. It's her strongest ability, and it's Enhariar.
What?
Enhariar? I'm sorry, I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that. So this is Shalltear's best ability, and basically it just makes a clone of her, as demonstrated in the anime. The light novel gives a little bit more explanation. Basically, some of her magic abilities and skills are lost, and also Enhariar doesn't have any items. However, it has all of her gear and ability points. So it's basically another level 100 opponent, which is super, super bad news for Ainz, but that is exactly what he was waiting for in order to trigger his skill. Following Enhariar's appearance, we have Ainz triggering the goal of all life is death. I have explained the skill, the goal of all life is death, in great detail in another one of my videos. I'll leave a link in the description for you guys to check that out if you feel compelled to. I'll give a very shorthand explanation as to what it does right here. Basically, what the skill does is it allows the user to bypass any insta-death immunity or resistance for any of their insta-death spells. And the drawback is it delays it by 12 seconds, and that's the clock countdown that we see in the background when Ainz uses it. So basically, he activates the goal of all life is death. He uses Widen Magic, Cry of the Banshee, which has this huge area of effect. That's an insta-death spell, which obviously has no effect on Enhariar or Shalltear because they have insta-death immunity. However, 12 seconds go by, as we see with the countdown, the skill activates, and that turns Cry of the Banshee into a spell that kills everything. It turned it into a 100% success rate insta-death spell with a huge area of effect in which you cannot resist it and you have no immunity to. However, Shalltear is able to recover from this, and that's because she had a resurrection item. And something that isn't in the anime is that Ainz did not know Shalltear had the resurrection item. He thought that was the end of the fight, potentially, and he got mad. It was in his mind. He was like, fuck, Peronchino, did you have to give her a resurrection item? I know that was just to counter me. And that's the only way to counter the goal of all life is death. You have to use a resurrection effect on yourself, and that basically what it does is it will kill the resurrection effect instead of you. That's kind of how it works. And Ainz is actually surprised by the effect of the skill and the insta-death effect of the goal of all life is death, because it literally killed everything. It killed the plant life and even killed the dirt. All organic material just was destroyed. It was a difference in how magic is in a real world versus a game for Ainz. So then that leads us into episode 13, where we find out that the battle has proceeded relatively according to plan.
Oh my dude, you just got pranked.
So I gotta say, episode 13 in total, there is not gonna be a whole lot for me to comment on. This episode was surprisingly faithful to the source material. Very little things were omitted from this, and that's probably because so little of the light novel is covered in this entire episode. Like, I think it's something along the lines of like 20 pages that is covered in this episode. It's insane. I will admit, one of the bigger things that is omitted from the anime during this time is that pretty much in the anime, this is all from like kind of a third person out point of view. However, in the light novel, this is all from Shaltyr's point of view, and we get a lot of her inner thoughts, basically just so mad at this whole situation that she was tricked like this. A lot of it is just like she thought about this but she didn't care, or she considered this for a moment but she didn't care and just wanted to hurt Ainz. Like her mental state during this whole portion is completely just reckless and crazy. Ainz uses this to his great advantage, and this is one of the major things I think that is kind of an overarching theme of Overlord, is how this is not the game anymore, and how much more of a difference things like mental state come into play in a fight in real life, much more than they do in a fight in a game. So then we have Shaltyr attacking Ainz, and Ainz casting Perfect Warrior to don the armor. So the anime explains that this was Touch Me's armor, but what exactly is the armor? It can only be worn by a world champion class character, and that was a very rare title to or class to receive. In order to get the world champion class, you had to win an official tournament hosted by Yggdrasil devs, which of course is a very rare thing to happen. And Touch Me won one of these tournaments, and his choice, he was given a choice of items to choose from, and one of them was the armor. Ainz said that in terms of levels, it's technically a god level item, but its abilities are closer to that of a guild weapon. So this armor is ludicrously powerful. And then also it explains Ainz's strategy a little bit as to why he's doing this, because now they're both out of MP and skills for the most part. However, Shaltyr is not spec'd as a pure warrior, and so when Ainz transforms into a pure warrior using Perfect Warrior, he is now at a statistical advantage against Shaltyr in terms of specs. Additionally, he has better gear because he's now using the weapons of the other supreme beings, and he has Touch Me's armor on, which is more powerful than Shaltyr's armor. So basically, at this point, Ainz has completely flipped the script on this fight in Shaltyr's eyes. She's just like, how did this happen? How I was at an overwhelming advantage, and all of a sudden he is now a better warrior than I am, and not only that, he has better items than me. So, and I have no skills, no magic left, so I'm a complete disadvantage now, which was not what she was expecting, and that's why she goes so batshit. Ainz also has a comment in this fight that something that gives him an edge is that he had real battle experience against Clementine. It was something he commented on. He was grateful that he got the time to actually like fight someone as a warrior, because it's now coming in clutch to like give him some fighting experience as to how that actually works, because he doesn't know anything about fighting. And that's another thing contributing to that overarching theme I was saying, is something that doesn't come into play in a fight in a game versus a fight in real life is the battle experience of someone actually crossing swords with someone. I believe they said in the light novel that Shaltyr doesn't really have memories of her like previous like raids and everything like that, so she has no like real world experience with fighting. She's just relying on her natural abilities, as opposed to Ainz, who has some experience fighting against someone like with swords. So then we have the final clash, and this is something that is expanded upon a little bit more in the light novel as well. So something that's elaborated on in the light novel actually is that Ainz isn't 100% sure this is going to kill Shaltyr. He's second guessing himself. He's just like, oh, did I do the math right? Did I do my calculations right on my magic defense? Or is this gonna work out? He's not sure, but he has no other choice at this point because his HP is decreasing faster than Shaltyr's. At this point, he's ready to take the gamble on it not working. So, but in the anime, it seemed like he was positive this was gonna work, but in the light novel, it's very clear that Ainz is still having his doubts on whether that he's gonna be able to pull this off. And we have that moment right before he uses the cash shop item. He kind of stops for a second. In the anime, it just seemed like he messed up breaking it. In the light novel, he hesitated. He just had this feeling of, I don't want to kill Shaltyr, and like, oh, how could I do this to Peroncino's creation or something, and it made him stop for a second. And then we have something that happens in the anime as well, but it's never explained at all what that was. In the anime, it's a little scene, we see like this eyeball behind Shaltyr, and it distracts her for a section, and she looks away, which allows Ainz to use the cash shop item. And that's actually one of Aura's skills. Aura used it from very far away. She has a ranger ability, so she has a very long observation distance. Normally, Shaltyr is immune to psychic effects, but that skill of auras is not treated as such, and that's why it had an effect on her. It just kind of happens in the anime, and you have no idea what that is. But yeah, in the that was aura, just to let you guys know. But then speaking of aura, then after the fight ends, something that is, I like the way they showed it in the anime. Aura is upset about this whole situation. She's very sad about it. In the light novel, she calls Shalltear her #1 friend. Oh, like even though she revolted against Ainz, it still hurt to see her die. Mara in the light novel is just like, okay, like I probably shouldn't talk to her because she's very clearly in a bad mood. And I did like how in the anime they showed that she was upset. That was very well done on that part. So then we move on to Shalltear's resurrection, and I have to be honest, guys, I have pretty much nothing to say for this last part of the episode. It is pretty much exactly the same. The only thing I can comment on is so how the resurrection actually worked. Ainz comments that in Yggdrasil he would have had to spend a lot of time on the console in order to do this, but in the new world he just automatically knows how this whole thing works. It's an instinct. It's sort of like his instinct that he got that he couldn't get any stronger, that like he was already at the strength cap. It was similar to that. It was almost like an info dump as soon as he became like an incarnated being in the new world. So something else I wanted to add is that all those epilogue scenes that we see at the end of the anime episode, like with Gazef running into Brain and Inferia and his grandma packing up, other than the one at the Adventurers Guild, none of those exist in the light novel. So those are anime exclusive kind of little epilogue scenes that they showed us. And with that, guys, volume 3 of Overlord is wrapped up, and also Overlord season 1. This arc is one of my favorites in all of Overlord, and it's so important to the overarching story as well, because the events of this arc and everything that happened with Shalltear basically dictates Ainz's mindset and actions moving forward, makes him into the cautious overthinker that he becomes in the later volumes because of what happened. He realizes there are actual threats out there that he needs to always prepare for, even when it doesn't happen. He prepares for them anyway. And it also sets the stage for a lot of world events that happen involving the Slain Theocracy, because all 3 arcs involved the Slain Theocracy. Arc 1 was the wiping out of the Sunlight Scripture. Arc 2 with Clementine stealing the Crown of Wisdom from the Slain Theocracy. And then there was Arc 3 with Shalltear decimating the Black Scripture and like their involvement in Shalltear's mind control. And because the Slain Theocracy is such a powerful country, that has rippling effects throughout the new world that are explained in later volumes as well. So this season, this arc, it really got the ball moving in terms of what is happening in the new world, and also where our main character is going to go from here. So guys, I really hope you enjoyed this double feature. I was really looking for small stuff to talk about in these 2 episodes, because like I said, they just did such a good job with the adaptation, just because of how little of the light novel they put into these 2 episodes. They could almost make a lot of things verbatim from the light novel, which is always great to see in the Overlord anime, because it doesn't always do that. It was a lot of fun for me to revisit season 1 with you guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please hit that like and subscribe button on your way out. With all that being said, I want to thank you all for watching to the very end of the video, and I will see you all next time. Bye.